Very careful measurements show the wheelhouse will clear the roof by just 80 millimetres. It's an amazing coincidence that everything fits so snugly. The conglomeration of steel parts is about to become a boat. The crowd gathers as the tide rises. Very long mooring lines attached at each corner. The slipway winch is brought into action and the wire shackled to the front of the cradle and hauled taut. Railway runners are bolted to the underside of the cradle and a 25-ton hydraulic jack used to rock the whole hull back until they contact the rails. The cradle is now ready to launch. The brake is released. Nothing happens. We pull it up 600 millimetres and again release the brake. The vessel starts to move and then almost grudgingly continues. It was a great moment when the boat launched and actually floated well above her mark, so I knew I could put all the structure inside her and sink her down and she'd still float high in the water. A quick check is made for leaks and then, proudly, I use a motorboat to tow her the 5 miles round to Wootton Creek where she is to be moored. Finally she is afloat, bobbing on the high tide. It has taken 6 months and about 3,500 man-hours. The last measurement I took showed the completed vessel is only 2 millimetres out of line.
This is Wootton Creek where I live. I work with my father and 2 welders on all aspects of the work except the main welding.
My mooring has a few advantages. I won't have any worries about the vessel for half the time, as it will be hard aground at low tide and unable to sink or drift away. We'll be in sight from my bedroom window, where apart from my wife it will be the last thing I see at night and the first thing I see in the morning. I spent the previous 18 months advertising in the local press and picking up small quantities of scrap lead from various parts of the island. 2 tons has come from a printer who is changing over from hot metal type to computers. This printer's lead consists of millions of individual letters, which can only be lifted with a shovel. He also sells me a gas-powered smelter that can melt 1/4 of a ton of lead at a time. During the fitting out, I will hand lift enough stuff aboard this 20-metre vessel to sink it 600 millimetres. I struggle to throw a lump of lead above my head. It lands on the deck with a thud, and I calculate later that it sinks the vessel by 1/5 of a millimetre. A butane gas bottle is connected to the smelter and some small pieces of lead loaded in the cauldron. Let the smelting commence. Lead emits highly toxic fumes, so I used an air-powered face mask and retire to the afterdeck whenever possible. It's lucky for the neighbours that I'm in the middle of the river. We can begin painting. 3 coats will need 5 kilometres of hand-painted epoxy. Because the mooring dries out, I can only work around high tide for about 5 hours each day. I now need to pay others to do the foam installation and the woodwork. Can I narrow the gap between the vessel and the shore? I'll shackle a wire to the bowsprit and use my 2-litre Vauxhall Carlton to pull the vessel from the mooring towards my garden. The vessel comes in 30 metres and then grounds, and the car wheels spin. I row out and attach a block to the bow. The wire now runs from a strong point on shore through the block and back to the car. The car's pull is doubled. I build a 50-metre scaffold walkway out to the bow. I run mains power to the boat. time for the foaming people.
They arrive in 2 Ford Transit vans. I make sure my wife is out when they drive down her garden.
As you can see, in between each frame, foam has been sprayed to help stop condensation as it's a steel boat.
I run electrics in all directions.
There's one of the conduit pipes for taking all the wiring up forward.
I'm using 24 volts for high loading tasks like engine starting and the capstan, and for long distances like the navigation and masthead lights. Because it is a steel boat, everything is insulated and fuses are fitted everywhere.
This is looking back into the main saloon. There'll be seating along this side, up forward, and then aft there'll be the navigation table back there. On the starboard side there will be a large galley with a cooker and freezer with cupboards above.
The original idea was that I would build a hull on the island and sail it over to the mainland to get the mast. But one morning the managing director phoned me up to say that the company was going into liquidation. Luckily I paid for it, but I wanted to get it out of the hands of the receiver, so I rushed over the next morning on the ferry, and by the afternoon had my mast on a 40-foot trailer. I then had to get it to the island and decided to use 2 8-man catamaran pontoons made of 40-gallon drums with scaffold poles. A larger than necessary engine is less efficient, so calculations helped me choose a 120 horsepower unit.
In practice, this gives the predicted 8.5 knots at
Full power.
and still uses less than 6 litres per hour at 5 knots.
This is the main hatch. It will allow the engine to be lowered directly into place above the keel.
It is a great relief when, after being stored in my garage for 18 months, the engine eventually fits in with less than 10mm of clearance at one point.
The capacitors are now 2,150 litres of fuel
and 2,400 litres of water. I hate underwater openings, and the sinks are only just above sea level, so I fit a 300 litre holding tank beneath the mid-cabin floor. Everything can drain into this and then be pumped overboard through a fitting in the topsides.
This is the sheltered wheelhouse. Although the wheel will be outside, it will allow the watch shelter as the boat will spend 95% of its time on autopilot. The bowsprit helps reduce the height of the mast and moves the centre of effort of the sails forward.
The soundness of the skipper's sleep is directly proportional to the size of the anchor.
The half-ton of chain will fit into this space in the keel to keep it as low and near to the centre of the vessel as possible. This is the forepeak where the sails and fenders will be held. This is the hatch into the lazarette. This is the steering quadrant, which I made in cows. We had to remember to fit it into the boat before we put the deck on.
A watertight gore gives access through bulkhead.
The size of these openings is the result of many experiments in my garage. I use G-cramps to cramp together 4 pieces of wood to define the highest step that will miss my shins and the lowest height that will miss my head.
One of my jobs was to design and make the stainless steel hinges.
4 pillars support the deck between the bulkheads, should the vessel be dropped upside down onto a wave.
Here's those beams from the mast foot that take the strength down through the bulkhead, down the oval door, and there's the one that takes it all the way down to the top of the keel.
We load 2 tons of wood aboard. My son Paul also helps me fit out the fore cabin and the wheelhouse, while the carpenter does the bits between.
This is all marine ply with mahogany veneer over the top. This one's a double cabin, double berth. 40-gallon drums at the front of the boat to keep it in trim, so it's always horizontal. So when we're working inside, we can get all our lines horizontal off levels.
Today, the cheap availability of laser levels would have allowed them to set up a level relative to the hull rather than the horizon. All the other furniture is below 1 metre high, so the eye takes in the full 5.6 metre sweep, giving a terrific feeling of space.
Storage is in overhead lockers, which extend down both sides. Beneath the settee, in galley lockers, and under the floor outboard of the engine compartment.
The hull is 20 metres long with a 1.5 metre bowsprit. The hull steel weighs 20 tonnes. She has a 5 metre beam, and when completed will have a draft of 2.85 metres and a freeboard forward of 1.75 metres. She will be rigged as a cutter. The mast is 23.5 metres high and she will carry 210 square metres of sail. She will have 130 horsepower diesel driving a 30-inch feathering propeller through a 2.91 reduction gearbox. The large flush deck makes it easy to move around. When in remote areas, we will collect rainwater. Moderate rain will give us about 300 litres an hour.
Melting the lead and doing the painting takes up 6 months of part-time work. When all this is complete, it is time to get the boat back into midstream.
The convenience of sailing is, in motoring terms, still analogous to having to stop, jack up one end of your car and change the smaller wheels every time you come to a hill. On the next high tide, the vessel is pulled to its mooring without incident and then towed round to Cowes to be lifted out of the water to a previously constructed cradle. The 230 square metres of hull plating are given 4 coats of white paint, and the 100 square metres below the waterline is coated with 3 coats of anti-fouling. It is mercifully only after launching that I discover that the hammerhead crane we are using to lift my pride and joy 15 metres into the air was put in place in 1912 and was second-hand when it arrived. It is time to return under power to our home mooring in Wootton Creek. As agreed, a sailmaker's representative joins us and we try out all the sails. They set correctly and work well together. The mast is stepped and held upright from 4 directions. The best rig is the one that produces the most forward thrust, together with the least heeling and slewing forces, and does this over the greatest range of wind speed and directions. Engineering calculations show that it would be possible to safely stand the 50-ton vessel vertically on the bowsprit. Global Surveyor is now ready for her circumnavigation.